The Ravens Preview Show with Andy Pollin starts right now.
It wasn't perfect, it wasn't pretty, but it was the Ravens.
Listen to all Ravens broadcasts right here on 6:30 a.m., the ESPN 630 app, or ESPN630DC.com.
And with 1:17 left to play, the Hayes in the barn.
Now, here's Andy Pollin.
Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers from M&T Bank Stadium tomorrow afternoon. Our coverage here on ESPN 630 gets underway at 4 o'clock for the 4:30 kickoff, and it's always good to talk to Tony Lombardi of the Russell Street Report, who has joined us in the past and joins us again, has been following the Ravens forever. And I assume you follow betting lines, not like an expert, but follow them along. Do you not?
I do, and this one has really got me puzzled. It's 6.5. It seems a bit extreme in the swinging the Ravens' way.
Yeah, it really does. That's not the odds I want to get to. We will get to that, but hear me out on this. Last night, the brother of John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, did something that has only been tried 27 times in NFL history and was successful. A free kick after a fair catch, which I remember from the 1970s with the Redskins. Mark Mosley was actually sent out to try a 74-yarder, which he missed. But this was a 57-yarder from Cameron Dicker. If you went to Vegas, I don't know if you could find this prop bet, but if you wanted to make a brother double bet that John Harbaugh tomorrow might have the opportunity to try this, what do you think the odds would be?
They would be astronomical, particularly with the weather forecast and the winds that are supposed to be up in the 30 miles per hour. But that was insane, And the Harbaugh brothers are really into the stats and to the analytics of football, and I'm sure I guess that played a role in yesterday's decision with Jim Harbaugh going for that 57-yard with Dicker the kicker.
Yeah, Dicker the kicker, who said he had been prepped for this by the special teams coach. And Jim Harbaugh actually said he tried one in San Francisco and didn't get it done. So he can add that to his career accomplishments along with winning a national championship. All right, you mentioned the odds, and they are surprising. But, maybe it may be that this is such a desperation game. I don't know if you can call it that, but it's a game that seems to be, anyway, more important to the Ravens than the Steelers. Steelers win, division's over, they clinch. Ravens still stay alive, they don't necessarily win it. Do you think that desperation plays a role in those odds?
That's a good question. I think it plays a role in that locker room for the Ravens for sure, because they're talking about it all the time. They keep hearing that they've lost 8 of the last 9 contests against the Steelers. And while that's true, they want to qualify that by saying, well, twice we already had the number 1 seed locked up, so we didn't play our guys. 2 other times Lamar Jackson didn't play, so they kind of qualify it that way. But I think it's in their heads, much like the Chiefs are in their heads with regard to not beating them and Lamar Jackson referring to them as his kryptonite. I think the Steelers in some way are kryptonite also to the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, it is an odd record that they have. Some of it, of course, that Lamar didn't play. But you mentioned the swirling winds, and I'd say this is why you got Derrick Henry. And in the first game in Pittsburgh, they ran him only 13 times, didn't have him in on the 2-point conversion. John Harbaugh said, well, we have a setup, and he wasn't in the package. But to me, this is a game you got to run him 25 times, don't you think, Tony?
Well, you would think that, but I don't know. I think the Steelers are going to be geared up to stop Derrick Henry because Lamar Jackson really hasn't had much success against the Steelers throwing the football. So I think Mike Tomlin's approach is going to be much like it was last week against the Eagles. We're going to stop Saquon Barkley, so we're going to do the same thing with Derrick Henry and force Lamar to beat us because he hasn't been able to do that in the past. So, and Todd Monken has had, I want to stop short of saying it's a habit, but he's had a propensity to abandon the run early in games when it's not successful early. Instead of staying at it, understanding that Derrick Henry wears down a defense and he's more effective in the fourth quarter over the course of his career, I think he abandons the run game too soon. And I think if the Steelers sell out to stop it early, the Ravens might divert to throwing the football around. And that's where those swirling winds come into play again, because that's going to be something that's going to inhibit them being able to throw the ball downfield. like the Eagles did last week against the Steelers.
Which brings up the kicking game, and that's how the Steelers won last time, kicking and scoring nothing but field goals. And then you also have their own issues. The Ravens with Tucker. You think they've moved past that, or is the Tucker concern still high?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that it's high inside the locker room. I know it's high amongst the fan base.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when, anything from inside of 60 yards, if Justin Tucker was trotting out there on the field, fans were pretty confident he was going to knock it through. That's not the case anymore. He's almost like a golfer with the yips off the tee box, and he's a guy that's just, it seems to be in his head, and until it's not, it's going to stay there. It's like rent-free right inside of his head, and until he has a few successful kicks from beyond 50 yards, I think, that's something he's going to have to get over mentally.
Yeah, I mean, the irony of ironies, if at the end of the season they look up and the reason they didn't win the division was the best kicker of all time had a bad year. And that's
Right.
That's something to get your head around. We're talking to Tony Lombardi of the Russell Street Report. Let me throw this out at you. John Harbaugh is a great coach. He won a Super Bowl. He's been there, 16, 17 years. But I wonder about, how this season will be defined. It's obviously going to be the postseason. And as good as regular season as they may wind up with and run the table in the last three and things fall into place, win the division, et cetera, if they flame out in the playoffs, if they go out early, could there be serious discussions about making a change? I mean, at some point, everybody outlasts their run there. It's Bill Belichick being an example of that. I mean, is that in play that if there's a first-round upset that John Harbaugh could be on the hot seat?
That's a decision that Steve Bisciotti would have to make. And I know Steve to be a really thoughtful person. He thinks things very well through and looks at all the repercussions of a decision, particularly a big one like this. And I know that he likes consistency and continuity in his organization, and they've had that for a long time, and that's been a breeding ground for success, long-term success. So I think that would be a really tough decision for him to make, unless there was somebody out there that they really like, that they wanted to move on from. Brian Billick had won a Super Bowl just a few years before Steve Bisciotti decided to fire him, and the reason he fired him was because he thought he had lost the locker room. I don't know that that's the case with John, but to your point, I think at some point in time, the message becomes old and stale.
Yeah.
And how many times can you rally a locker room together and say, who's got it better than us? That just gets to be old after a while, particularly when you don't win, and particularly when you have these bitter losses in the playoffs against teams you should have beaten. They should have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs last year, and they did not. And if that keeps coming around, maybe John's one of those guys that can only get you so far, but he can't get you over that hump. And if there's a guy out there that Steve Bisciotti thinks can, I think he might do that if they're one and done in the playoffs. But unless he has somebody out there, I think he'll give it another go. I think that John he's going to be in 2025 a lame duck head coach, unless they've quietly extended him without telling anybody.
Yeah. I mean, and that's usually a sign that it's over. But I think that the point you make about, the same voice over and over, I look at what happened with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tony Dungy's a Hall of Fame coach, went on to win a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning and the Colts. But, the Bucs looked at it and said, okay, maybe they're tired of this approach. They bring in a guy who's got a totally different approach John Gruden. We had the other one here. They bring in John Gruden, and he's a totally different voice. They even traded for him and won a Super Bowl. And I just look at Lamar Jackson, who's in the prime of prime years, and do you want to waste too many more of this with maybe someone whose voice is not as loud as it used to be in the locker room?
Yeah, that's a great point, Andy, because, you look at, let's say Lamar wins, let's say he has a big game against the Steelers, and now he's the front runner again for the MVP race. Now he wins his third MVP without a Super Bowl. Who do you start pointing fingers at?
Yeah. I think that's got to be totally in play. Now, you look across at the other sideline on Saturday, and you see Mike Tomlin, who's sort of the same circumstance, right? It's been a long time since he won a Super Bowl, a long time since he won a playoff game, but it looks like they've done the smart thing and sticking with him as he's totally revitalized Russell Wilson's career. So I guess there's both sides of this.
There is, and when you look at Mike Tomlin and you think about, even when you watch him on HBO's Hard Knocks, you just see a guy that seems to be such a motivator, knows how to get to players without being their best friends, and they respect him. He's like a mentor and a motivator, and I see that in him. I don't know that I see that with John Harbaugh as much as I see with Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, different approach, obviously.
Right.
All right, you mentioned the 8 out of 9, and this is a game that they maybe not just want to win, but have to win. Do you think the Ravens are able to pull this off tomorrow?
I think they will. I looked at Lamar Jackson against the Steelers, and most of those games have been in Pittsburgh. Lamar has only started one game against the Steelers in Baltimore, and that was during the COVID year in front of about 5,000 fans. So I think the atmosphere is going to be different this time around. I think there's a sense of desperation that you mentioned earlier on with the Ravens versus the Steelers, and I think that's going to carry them to a win against the Steelers tomorrow afternoon.
And any hangover, look-ahead effect when they got to turn around quickly and play on Christmas Day? Do you think that plays into it as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on in the NFL that could make these weeks 17 and 18 rather insignificant because some of these things might be set, but I don't think that's the case with the Ravens. I think they'll still be motivated. But, Andy, coming off a Steeler game, which is always a very physical game for the Ravens, and having to fly out to Houston on Christmas Day on such a short week, yeah, the NFL is really concerned about player safety.
Oh, yeah, but Roger Goodell said we worked this out. Oh, they play on Saturday. They'll have plenty of rest. It's okay. Yeah.
Right. 3 games in 11 days.
Yeah. And next year, I guess, would it be Thursday? So it'll be fine with them, I guess. I don't know. It's crazy. Anyway, great to talk to you, as always. If people want to get the Russell Report, how do they do that?
You can find us on RussellStreetReport.com and on Twitter the same way, Russell Street Report. On Facebook and Instagram, you can find us at Ravens247.
Thanks, Tony. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. That's Tony Lombardi, Russell Street Report, and he does believe the Ravens will win. More preview coming up, what Chris Sims says about it with Mike Florio, and what Jeff Saturday says about what this game means to Lamar Jackson. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
Ravens on 3, 1, 2, 3.
This is the Ravens Preview Show presented by Verizon. Here's Andy Pollin.
62nd meeting between the Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers as the Ravens hold a healthy edge in the series, 36-25, and they won 8 of the last 9. They match up again tomorrow in Baltimore. That'll be a 4:30 kickoff, and our coverage here on ESPN 630 will get underway at 4 o'clock. Chris Sims, Mike Florio looking at this game, looking at the scores of these games. Of the 9 games, the winning team has had 20 or more only twice. Most of the games have been won by a team in the teens. That's how these games go, tight defensive battles, and this is what Sims is expecting tomorrow.
If this game stays in the high teens, 19-17, 20-17, then yeah, I like Pittsburgh. And that's usually where these games are, is they're usually in that point range. I think this is the one that's going to change it. One, it does feel like the Baltimore Ravens have fixed some of their defensive issues and have been better in the secondary the last 3 to 4 games. So that's encouraging. We know they can stop the run and do that. George Pickens, his status, right? That's huge, right? I'm expecting he's going to play here. Is he going to be totally 100%? I don't know. It doesn't look like that. So that bothers me. Right? So, and this is not a super explosive Pittsburgh offense. I think second time around, the Baltimore offense getting another crack at this Pittsburgh defense. They left some plays on the field the first time around. They certainly could have moved the ball more, whether it was Lamar missing passes, drops. He played one of his poorer games in that game, let alone they had the interception out of Justice Hill's hand ripped out. He missed a touchdown opportunity. I think Baltimore self-corrects here, scores more points, makes the game a little bit more on their terms. I'm going to go 28-20 Ravens.
The injury issues are very real for the Steelers on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
2 of their best players are question marks. We'll get the final designations today because it's a Saturday game, but Pickens didn't practice Tuesday or Wednesday with that hamstring injury. TJ Watt, who's got an ankle injury that happened late in the game against the Eagles, didn't practice Tuesday, limited in practice on Wednesday. Greater degree of optimism. He'll be good to go. And I got the impression from Mike Tomlin last week that they're going to sit Pickens until he's 100%.
Seems
they
like
don't
it.
want to have that
Right.
get aggravated. And even if it means not winning the division, even if it means having to go on the road in the playoffs, they want Pickens to be healthy when it's time to play single elimination football. I got the Ravens 23-17, which makes me a little nervous because I kind of feel like they should cover, but I'm not changing it. I'm sticking with the number I put down. Didn't know the spread when I did it. 23-17, at home, late afternoon, lights on, national TV. Lamar Jackson shows up, gets his second win against the Steelers. He's 1-4 all time, and his only win came, as we said earlier today, in 2019 in overtime against a combo platter of Mason Rudolph and Devlin Duck Dodge.
Devlin Dodge, oh, God. Yeah, so it's a little bit different with Russell Wilson, who's been to 2 Super Bowls and has won 1, but he does like the Ravens there. The spread, as we talked about with Tony Lombardi, kind of surprising, 6.5. Ravens are favored, given that the Steelers have pretty much owned them over the years and winning 8 of the last 9, but we'll see what happens. Update on T.J. Watt, by the way, full participant in practice yesterday, so the ankle not bothering him, and he'll be out there. And as I talked with Tony Lombardi, I mean, this is a game to me where Derrick Henry's got to get the ball for 25 carries. He had only 13 in the first matchup, not out on the field when they had a really wild and botched 2-point conversion after Zay Flowers brought him within 2 with 1:06 to go. Didn't get it done. They lost that game 18-16. So I would expect that they'll have a better game plan. But as Tony said, Steelers are really good at stopping the run, and they may dare Lamar to beat him through the air on a day that's supposed to be very windy and very cold tomorrow afternoon. Now, as for what this means for someone who could win his 3rd MVP this year, Lamar Jackson, Jeff Saturday said this week on ESPN.
Lamar Jackson they have to win this game. If you talk about how great a season it is, it's all this, you got to go beat the Steelers. You're 1-4 against the Steelers. We talk about pressure games and playoffs. This is a playoff game, and they better look at it that way because they have underwhelmed everybody this season. And with the talent they have, in a division opponent, you got to get this win.
Yeah, now they've proven they can beat good teams, but they've also proven that they can lose to bad teams. They lost the game to the Raiders this year, and this is a good team coming in. And the kind of game that you got Roquan Smith a couple of years ago from the Bears just for this. And when you talk to Roquan Smith, you hear the kind of things that you want to hear from a leader and a linebacker on a team that's legendary for linebacker play.
I got a great deal of respect for Lamar. He knows that, and everyone around the building does as well. And, I actually was chatting with him, I don't know when this was, but recently, and I just told him, yeah, bro, you done had MVP years and different things like that, but I told him, hey, you playing a different style of ball, right now, and it's not just he want to beat you from the pocket, and then, if that's not available, then he can take it down, running second. So it's kind of crazy, and then, how he can get through his reads, and create more time, make his line better, everything, man. What the guy's doing is truly special, and you just have to actually be next to the guy and actually just watching him from a view to truly appreciate some of the things that he's doing. So, and I've always said, extremely happy that he's on my team and I'm not playing against him because a lot of headaches for sure.
Yeah, that's on Lamar Jackson. This is Roquan on that kind of talk that linebackers like to talk, and that is check your manhood for a game like this.
It's gonna be a hostile environment for sure. Make no mistake about that. Those guys gonna come in and we knowing what's on the line. It's the division title. And each and every team in the division want to win a division. So you're willing to put everything on the line for that. And I know myself personally, I'm ready to go out on my shield one way or another. And I know a lot of the guys in the locker room feel the same exact way. And so that's what it's gonna be. Check your manhood, do your job. You do that, we'll win the game. So that's all of what it's about. Every single person do their job, and if we do that, we'll like the results. It's just that simple.
And Roquan, who got off to kind of a slow start this year, has really picked up his play in recent weeks. So here's the circumstance in the division, and the Steelers have already clinched a playoff spot. They go into this 10-4. Ravens are 9-5. If the Steelers win, even with 2 games to go, they would win the division. They own the tiebreakers. If Baltimore wins, then you got both teams at 10-5, and things get very interesting down the stretch. Both teams in the same circumstance this week, playing on a short week, as you got the Christmas Day game coming up next week, and that means that both teams will have to face tough situations as the Steelers are going to play the Kansas City Chiefs, and then the Ravens are going to have to go to Houston for the late game on Christmas Day. That'll be a 4:30 kickoff. So this is the stretch that they've been talking about. Maybe they got an opportunity to play against the JV last week and easily beating the New York Giants, but now this is going to be a much tougher game at home, and it kind of has the feel, not exactly the feel, but because of the weather, because of the time of year, even though it's a month earlier, it kind of has the feel of that game against Kansas City last year for the AFC Championship. I know it's not nearly as big, but in many ways, this is, and I hate to use this cliche, but it's the kind of statement game that they have to win. And what you're hearing from Jeff Saturday is this is a game that Lamar has to prove it. He's been a great player, 2-time MVP, maybe a 3rd-time MVP winner this year. But this is where your career is made, winning big games. And you win this game, you put yourself in a great position so that as you head into the playoffs, you can do it as a division winner. And even not out of the question, though I wouldn't expect Buffalo and Kansas City to slide that much, but there is still the possibility of home field throughout the playoffs. So all that in play tomorrow. Big game. Again, 4:30 kickoff. Our coverage here on ESPN 630 will get underway at 4 o'clock. I want to thank Tony Lombardi of the Russell Street Report for joining us today, Isaac Hoon-Harris for running the show. All of you who listen, Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you Monday morning at 9 a.m.